Welcome, everyone. Today we have Dan Segarra and Travis Tohill both joining us. Their work at Blue Sky Animation Studios. We're going to be talking today about how to become an animator. Both these guys are animators and they have a lot of experience that they can share with you. Before we get started, I have a little bit of business I wanted to cover, just so you guys kind of know how this webinar will be flowing. One, there is a chat panel that you guys can open up within Zoom. I want to make sure that when you do open it, that you change it from to all panelists to all panelists and attendees. That way you guys can see each other as you chat. With Animation Mentor, we're all about the community, and so we want you to be able to talk to each other and start making those connections. So once again, open up the webinar chat, and then you can change it to all panelists and attendees. Next up, I wanted to mention that the latter portion of this webinar, both Dan and Travis will be taking your questions. So if you have any questions for them that weren't covered within the webinar, that'll be a great time to ask them. Go ahead and use the Q&A panel. You can open up that and use that to ask your questions. The chat flies by, so we can't keep track of everything, and we'll use that panel specifically to jump into your questions. So with that, I want to go ahead and kick things off. I'll introduce myself. My name is Justin Owens. I work at Animation Mentor, have been there for 6 years and just love animation and the educational process. And I love getting to talk to guys like these. So, today we're going to be talking about how to become an animator. We'll be talking about the student journey, the mentor journey, and getting a job. What do you need to do after you've finished your educational experience? So with that, I wanted to kind of ask you both to introduce yourself a little bit and kind of how you got to this point today.
Great.
Take it away, Dan.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Dan Segarra. I work at Blue Sky. I've been there for about 8 years. Before that, I was working in the industry, like on slot machines. While I was working on slot machines, I got a job after that on video games. And then I took Animation Mentor. I was actually part of the first class of Animation Mentor. And I loved it. And then from there, I felt like as if I grew so much after taking all these classes about performance and physicality. And then I was able to get a job at Real Effects after that happened. So I was at Real Effects for a couple of years, then went to Rhythm and Hues for a couple of years, then went to Sony, and then after that came to Blue Sky. And I've been here ever since, and I love it here. It's a great culture, so I'm happy to kind of plant my roots here. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
I know you worked on slot machines. That's awesome.
Yeah, slot machines.
So hey guys, I'm Travis. So yeah, I was a student at AM also way back in the day. I think I was in class 10, so about 3 years after Dan. Yeah, before that I grew up in Nashville and was a musician. Made a living for a few years as a drummer there, and finally got to playing major labels and realized it wasn't the career I wanted to have. It didn't really suit me. So.
And I heard he's amazing, by the way.
I used to be able to write some drums. I can hold a beat, but
that's what our coworkers say.
I'm rusty. But yeah, I went and got a coffee shop job and just plugged into AM and got really lucky afterwards and went to ILM. I was there for several years, and then decided I wanted to try feature animation and went down to Real Effects for a few years. And I've been back to Tippett and ILM for VFX projects since then as well. I've been in Los Angeles. I'm mainly based out of Los Angeles now, and was doing development work as head of animation for a startup studio. And then came over to Blue Sky to work on Spies in Disguise. And Dan is right. It's an awesome place to work.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you both, when you're first starting to study animation, we probably have a lot of people in here who are in school right now. Can you talk to me about the importance of the fundamentals of animation? How often do you even use those fundamentals in your work?
Daily.
Yeah, a better question would be, when are you not using them? I mean, it's we were actually just in the car ride over here, literally talking about that. How
This is
just
true.
yeah, we were just having this conversation about how if we could have students come out of Animation Mentor with any one thing, it would be a really strong grasp of those fundamentals, because it's the building block for everything else you do. I mean, everything else is just honestly a fancy version of those fundamentals.
Right, and with Blue Sky, especially since a lot of their style is kind of cartoony, we were just saying like how much more important like just having fundamentals of true mechanics and true like physics is, even on top of cartoony stuff, because you still need to know that stuff in order to exaggerate it and push either the timing or the posing. It still has to maintain true physics.
Yeah, and it's also in terms of the theme of this Q&A. If you want a job in animation, having a grasp of those fundamentals, those mechanics, right, that is what makes you the most employable, because those apply to every single style of animation.
Right.
So if you can start from there, you can learn to do any other style. It's just a great foundation.
Cool. And for context for everyone who's joined us, what do you consider those key fundamentals to be? Is it, timing, spacing, body mechanics? Like, what kind of recipe would you put together for those core fundamentals?
For me, I think, I mean, you can say like all the principles of animation. Obviously, you need to have that stuff in there. But a lot of it, to me, comes with like observation. And like if you shoot your own reference and take the time to see what's happening in the reference, a lot of times you're going to get that information. So it's like what's happening to the hips as it's walking forward, and that's kind of like the fundamentals of like weight shifting. You get weight, you get what is it, center of gravity, and just make sure that the timing is there as well. I mean, you can see that all from analyzing reference. So I feel like observation is an important part of it, you know?
Yeah, and for me, I think the things, obviously the 12 principles of animation, those are very specific breakdowns of, the fundamentals, but
things that are happening.
Right. I mean, and even when you're animating every day on the job, you're not necessarily always thinking of the 12 principles individually in your head, but you are doing that. You're kind of combining them, like timing and spacing often get combined, and like, they're all kind of tied together. But if you've got strong posing, a strong sense of timing, and then a strong sense of like physics and body mechanics, that's gonna get you most of the way there in terms of the fundamentals. Like if you've got a strong grasp of those, that then allows you to make all the creative choices you need. Whatever creative choices you have, if you have a really strong handle on those, you'll probably be able to execute most of those ideas.
Right, and by strong, I think like it's, you can look at your own work and it's kind of hard to say like, okay, is this showing strong mechanics and strong weight? And it almost is like, one of the biggest notes is like, is your timing even? Is it kind of floaty? A lot of times people are like, oh, the animation looks a little floaty or swimmy. You have to avoid that at all costs. And that's like making sure that there's a little bit, and this is what weight is like when things are heavy, the frames are closer together, the poses are closer together, because it shows that it takes a longer for something to change direction.
Yeah.
So you're going to add a little bit more weight, a little bit more time, and then when things transition, they are quicker as they transition to the next pose. So a lot of that weight comes with, a lot of the spacing comes with the weight, and you can get that weight from looking at the animation. And then depending on what the style of the film is, you have to exaggerate that. So some things need to be snappier, so you have to understand, well, how am I going to get snappy timing depending on the weight, like you would understand from real physics where you can push things, Yeah,
a good portion of the job is just being able to look at your animation and be like, does that look weird? And then when it does, that's where the principles and the fundamentals, like that lets you kind of diagnose what the problem is. So a lot of people can look at animation and be like, oh, that looked weird. To be able to be an animator that can then fix it, that's why you have to have a strong grasp of all these concepts, because then you can go through and kind of pinpoint what exactly is making it feel incorrect, or what about it is distracting or not believable.
Right.
But I do feel like sometimes half the job is just being able to look at it and be like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
And then you fix it, and you just keep fixing until you've got a nice piece of animation.
Yeah, I like to make a list for myself and just be like, check, 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 check. And then with all those added like layers of things that you do to it, it gets better and better. You know? And then sometimes I can't see it, and then I'm like,
oh, it's often with your own work. It's so much
Can you look
better.
at this?
Yeah.
And tell me what's wrong with it.
Yeah. So any of you guys that are in here, if you're learning animation, rely on your classmates, your mentor. Get grandma to take a peek at it. There is no invalid opinion because you're just too close to your own work. It's kind of impossible to see it objectively sometimes.
I wanted to ask you both, like, when you were in the student mode and you were learning animation, what's kind of the main thing you felt you struggled with the most? And then how did you overcome that?
For me, the initial problem was I felt like, I still remember the nights as a student where you just kind of feel overwhelmed, like you're in the middle of working on something and it's not going well. And so there's a big leap from understanding a concept when it's explained to you and then being able to execute it well. And that to me is like, I would watch a lecture and I would talk to the mentor in the Q&A and I would understand what they're explaining to me how to do. Like in class 1, when you get to the overlap exercises, that's something that students often struggle with because you can understand conceptually what you're supposed to do, but then when you go to execute it, it just it's a slippery thing to try and hold on to. And really the answer to that is just practice. It's just putting in the hours. If there's any tip I can give to a student, I was very fortunate that I came out of school with a great job, and I don't think it was because I was just so talented they couldn't help but hire me. I think it's just you put in the time and then you slowly, that stuff starts clicking and all of a sudden it's working. And so I don't think there's really a magic bullet other than just putting in the work.
Yeah, mine is similar to that. Mine was trying to get the animation to express the idea that I wanted.
Yes.
That was difficult for me. A lot of times, sometimes the animation just morphed into an idea, and it wasn't like, I guess it's like, in terms of if it's a dartboard, just like the accuracy behind what you're trying to go for. A lot of times I would just like miss that bullseye pretty drastically. This was early on, I have to say. And even after Animation Mentor, where I started to like understand things, and I was working at Real Effects, I still felt like I was like, maybe I was on the board, but sometimes like it just didn't express what I needed to express, so I had to work on just making sure that my ideas read as the ideas that I was going for. Because sometimes you present it in Sweatbox or dailies, and it's not quite there, and then maybe like the director doesn't think it's going in a certain direction, so he thinks you're like doing something else instead of that, and he'll kind of be like, okay, it needs this, this, and this, and it's not necessarily what you were going for to begin with, because it's not quite expressing that idea that you wanted, So yeah, I think you just have to make sure that like, this is the idea that I want. What makes that idea? And then add those elements in your animation, because sometimes it could be a simple thing as like missing like a certain, like if you're doing an eye roll and you just go from here to here or something, you're missing like a crucial element of that really sells that idea. And you need to make sure that you put that in there in order to sell that idea, not just like this and this, because then they'll be like, oh, he's doing a head turn. Maybe he's trying to go like this or something, and it's just like expressing something else, and the director's not going to get it,
Yeah, I think so much of animation is being able to, and this is something that you just develop over time too, being able to look at an idea or performance and figure out what is the essence of that makes me feel that emotion that the character is feeling, that sells the story idea, and then being able to pinpoint the specific elements of it that are really important to that feeling, stripping out the stuff that you don't need, and then exaggerating what's left. And that's how you get really strong animation that communicates very clearly to an audience. And it's getting rid of the details that are hampering that clarity, and then pushing the details that are really important. But it takes time and practice to figure out exactly what those details. It's not just the weight shift or the foot hits down here. I mean, it's
a collection of like
Yeah.
a lot of things. Yeah.
And every shot is different. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no, that's one of the things that's frustrating and really fun about animation is like, there is no formula to make it work. It is a technical meets art situation.
And I imagine that's where the importance of feedback and showing your animation to others so that you make sure your ideas are actually reading the way you intend them to read is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because also, I mean, like, all of us have a little weirdness in us. So what means sad to you might not read that way to everybody.
Yeah.
It's not just enough to make yourself feel that you need an audience to feel that too. And so that feedback is just vital, because what's clear to you is not always clear to everybody else.
I wanted to transition a little bit into, the mentorship role. You've both been teaching here at Animation Mentor. You see a lot of students come in. You see their work in various states. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see in student work, and what's kind of the advice you'd want to share with everyone today on that?
This is a difficult question for me,
Yeah.
mainly because everybody's different.
Yeah.
So I can't really pinpoint like something specific. If there was a general thing, I would say just make sure you show something. Because sometimes students disappear. They don't show work maybe week after week. Like, don't be that student, because like you're paying money and you're getting you're giving I guess animators are giving you time to give you feedback and stuff, so you want to take advantage of that. And if you do show something, just put your best effort toward doing your best at that work, and just like when you get the feedback from I guess my answer is workflow. I think that's what the answer is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what I was saying is build your skill set while you're in school. And the reason I say that is because if you're thinking that way, you're going to take on assignments a little bit differently. You're not going to worry about, if you're thinking about your demo reel, you're going to tend to do things in your assignments that you can do well, rather than taking on the things that you're going to learn the most from. And then also you're going to spend more time like putting lighting in your assignment and textures and trying to make it pretty, when none of that matters.
Yeah.
None of that matters. It's not about the presentation, it's about the actual work. And so build your skill set, take on things, not that they're like drastically ambitious so that you can't accomplish it, but if for instance, physicality is your weak point, don't shy away from that. Dive into it hard, because school is the time to screw up. Because when you screw up and then you get your critiques and your feedback, you're going to learn from it and you're going to grow. And if you build your skill set to where you are a strong animator, the demo reel will just take care of itself. Like if you are a good animator, you can't help but have a good demo reel. That's just how it works. So that's the biggest thing I've noticed from students. They're really worried about making sure they have really high grades the whole time. And it's not about that. Like if in our school system, we have a 1 to 5 rating system. If you're getting 3s the whole time, but you're learning the most, that is way better than getting 4s and 5s, but you're not really growing your skills. And that's how you become really employable after school.
That's cool. So focus a whole lot less on, where's this shot going to fit on my demo reel, and focus way more on, what are the animation areas I'm struggling with, and really choose shots to build that out.
Yeah, because even anything from like class 1 through probably almost 4, like that shouldn't go on your demo reel anyways.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, because for one, those are going to be the exercises a lot of people have done. But 2, by the time you get done with the program, every 6 months, you're going to be way better than you were 6 months before. So that work no longer represents your skill set. So it shouldn't go on your demo reel. So that whole time period, you shouldn't even be considering whether it'll go on your demo reel. If it did, something went wrong. Yeah. Just get better. That's all that matters.
Yeah. And the way the school is structured, they already are thinking about your demo reel. So all of the assignments are engineered pretty much to give you to make you employable, pretty much, because like what are we looking for in the animation industry? We're looking for somebody who understands mechanics and physics, and somebody who can do a solid performance. And that's what the assignments are. That's what they do. So if you do the assignment as they are, it's going to be, you're going to be able to put it on your demo reel if you do it well. So I would say I completely agree with that, Travis.
And then what takes an animator to the next level is then when you have good ideas. But you have to build up that skill set first to even be able to show those ideas.
Yeah.
And that's where, the whole first 2/3 of the program, you're building that foundation to where by the end of the program, you can start really exploring your creativity, throwing ideas out there, but now you've got the basis to execute those ideas. And when those two things combine, that's when you end up in the industry.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. So Dan, for you, first thing is workflow. Make sure you're, doing the, assignments, whether you're at Animation Mentor or anywhere else, you want to make sure you're putting in the work, that you're showing progress. And then Travis, it's really like tackling your weaknesses so that you can really build those out and become a stronger animator.
Absolutely.
And I think that progress is really important.
Yes. Just
make sure like you're making progress. It's easy to be like, okay, I'm going to compare myself with this, another student in the class, and I'm not getting better than that person. You shouldn't be thinking about it that way. You should be thinking about like, am I better than yesterday? Am I doing work that is like maybe yesterday? Like, look at your work. Is mechanics kind of struggling? Are you struggling with the mechanics? But now you're kind of working better with the mechanics. Then that's an improvement, and then you just want to keep going and keep getting better with that.
Absolutely.
So compare your work with your work that it was yesterday.
Definitely look at other people's work too, not to like.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But if somebody's better than you, well, look and see what makes it better. Try and learn from that too. But it's exactly what Dan was saying. The whole goal is to improve on what you are capable of.
Somebody told me that actually before, like, but you want to compare yourself with like other people, and like that is very true. You want to look at like what's the standard in the industry, but that's not what I intend.
Yeah, but no, it's not like a ranking yourself. It's just, is there something I can take away from that work and add it to mine?
Exactly.
I mean, like, you don't want to steal ideas, but I will absolutely steal good little animation techniques, like for sure. Like that's, I mean, we're all techniques.
Not frame by frame.
Not frame by framing, but just
work. Don't do that.
Yeah, if they're doing something you're like, oh, that feels really nice, try and frame through it and figure out what makes it feel really nice. Try and, like we were talking about earlier, dissect. Like we dissect when our work isn't working, but you can also dissect when something really is working and learn from that too.
That's cool. One thing I wanted to ask you both about, and I think one of the struggles with learning animation is you might be working on the same shot as a student for multiple weeks. So you can kind of get tunnel vision on a shot. What are some techniques that you guys have to like sort of step back to sort of look at how a shot is going holistically? And second part to the question, and maybe a little bit of a leading question, do you recommend that students work on shots that are shorter so that the cycle is a little bit faster?
Okay, well, I guess I'll take a swing at this one first. I think that is one of the challenges of animation, whether you're a student or a professional, is you do get tunnel vision on your own work. You get to the point where you can see every frame of it. And everyone else, when they watch it, they don't see it that way. I mean, 2 days ago at work, I was talking to my supervisor, like, hey, someone's feeling a little weird in the hand right there. And he's like, I'm not seeing it, but if you feel, it's just, you get so close. And that's where that outside feedback is vital. So obviously with your mentor, like Dan was saying, there's this golden window when you're in a program like AM where you have these professionals that are going to give you this feedback and they're available to you. And so do everything you can, like squeeze every bit of juice out of that. Because that's not something like, yes, everyone in the industry will help you out, but it's not in the same context. Like they're specifically there to teach you and make you better. That's not something that's always available in the job every day, So take advantage of that, show your other students. And then it's little things like, you know, one of the tricks that we use all the time is just mirroring your animation. Like when you play it back, if you feel like you can't really tell anymore, flip the video and watch it in reverse. And then you'll be like, oh, oh God, that looks weird.
Yeah,
you know,
things will stand out.
Yeah, things really pop out. Now, you play that for 30 seconds or a minute, and all of a sudden you can't see that anymore either. I'll go so far sometimes when it's just a motion thing and I'm trying to see if there's a hitch, I'll flip it upside down. And just, because then it's like detaches you entirely. You can just see if there's a hitch in the motion when you're polishing things. So there's little tricks, but feedback is the biggest. And then for me, in terms of length of assignments, I do recommend quality over quantity. You know, if you do a 5-second shot, you do 5 seconds of okay animation that you didn't really get to fully polish up, or 2 seconds that you've really got to dig in hard, I would take the 2 seconds every time, because that way you're gonna learn the most by digging the deepest into the animation.
I agree with that in terms of like limit of your frames. I would go on toward the shorter end, and sometimes things increase in length anyway as you work on them. So, you know, just favoring the shorter length, I think, is a good habit to get into. Yeah, because it really is about quality, not about like quantity or the amount of seconds you have on your reel. No one ever said, oh, this reel is a minute long instead of 45 seconds long. Let's hire that guy.
Yeah.
Never.
I mean, it can't be too short. Like if you're turning in a 10-second demo reel, that may not cut it.
Yeah,
but,
right.
But yeah, I got an ILM off a very short demo reel.
Yeah.
And it was not because I was being brilliant with my demo reel. I had a 30-second demo reel, but it was just, that was the only work I had that was at that level. I knew if I put anything else on to lengthen my demo reel, the quality was a bit lower, because that was in a phase like all of you guys are in school where you're learning so quickly that what you did 3-4 months ago doesn't look as good. So it's always quality first.
Yeah. In regards to the other part of the question, in terms of like what was the question?
It was about, oh gosh.
It was you being able to step back and kind of get away from tunnel vision.
I had it in my head, and then So what I like to do a lot of times is, especially when it's just like I'm looking at the same animation over and over again, I'll clip animation from YouTube or from a movie that I like, and just like put it on the side, and I'll look at some clips, some of my favorite clips from, like, let's say, I don't know, Zootopia, because I think the animation in Zootopia is awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so I'll just like find some scenes that I like, and I'll watch that, and then I'll look at my animation, and I'll be like, yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I do that a lot, and I'm like, okay, this timing has a lot more energy and a lot more just like crispness. This is something that I want to add to my own animation. And it's just like, it almost just gives you a fresh new look on something you're looking at for so long.
I learned something from today's Q&A as well.
Yeah, that's a really cool tip. Kind of along those lines, you know, you kind of mentioned the idea of even when you finish studying animation, you know, you may not have the demo reel length you thought you would have because you're trying to make a really tight demo reel. I wanted to move kind of now into the career advice section. So imagine student has just graduated, they've finished. What do you recommend students do at that point? Are students going to be in a place where they just have a finished demo reel and they can just sit back and send that out? Or what should they be doing on a day-to-day basis to keep improving?
I think that you should always try to grow. So I feel like you should set like different exercises for yourself if you can, and they don't have to be overwhelming. Definitely, you don't have to do like another 10-second clip after you've animated for the past, you know, year and a half.
Yeah, take a week off
Animation
first.
mentor, right? Exactly.
Recover.
But you know, do another assignment, especially if you're not getting calls back. Right? Like, let's say you send your reel out to studios and you haven't gotten any calls. Work on another assignment. Ask what your reel needs work on, because maybe you're also doing the same mistakes over again. So you want to make sure that you're aware of your own weaknesses and work on those on new tests, you know. So what I was saying in terms of like, you don't have to do another 10-second, maybe like do a 5-second clip and then just like say, okay, I need to work on timing or wait, and then just focus on an assignment that has that, and that where you could really grow in that sense, in the wait sense. You know?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on this actually. I got some really good advice from some mentors of mine when I was in the program way back in the day that helped a lot. And so for me, actually, I did not finish AM with a demo reel that I felt was ready to go. I had one piece. Now, it was a pretty lengthy piece, but it was like 12, 15 seconds. It was a longer piece, but it was the only thing I felt like was up to snuff or represented where I was at the end of the program. And there was actually a job fair I was going to like 2 weeks after graduation. And so actually in that 2-week window, I redid one of my shots from class 4 that at the time I thought was really good. And then by the time I got done with class 6, I watched and I was like, oh, that's terrible. You know? And so I redid it. And what had taken me a month before, I redid in about 8 days. And it was so much better. And that's what I mean by that growth that happens. And those 2 shots are what got me in at ILM. But one of the things that I was told, just like Dan's saying, do exercise and things. Well, for starters, send out your demo reel when you get done. Don't tell yourself no. Let the studios say that first, because you might be sure. I did not think I would be working on movies at all. You know, if ILM had not been at that job fair, I was not going to send a demo reel to ILM because I didn't think I was anywhere near ready for that, and was dumbfounded that they did want to hire me. You know, so you don't know. So we're all our own worst critics in that regard. I still struggle with liking anything I've ever done because I see all the things I wanted to do. No one else sees that stuff, you know? And so, so that's the first thing. Do send out your reel. But if you find that you're not getting the feedback you want, or you're not getting the jobs you're looking for, like he was saying, take the areas that you feel like you're struggling in and do short exercises. But one of the best tips I ever got was set a deadline for yourself. Because one of the mistakes that I think people make is they start something thinking again of the demo reel. If your demo reel is not good enough yet, it probably means the skill set still needs work. So set like a week, 2 weeks at most limit for yourself, and go through the entire animation process. Because a lot of people will start an assignment and then they'll polish it for the next 4 months. Well, if your blocking wasn't great or your ideas weren't there, then you just spent a lot of time polishing something that's not going to help you get that job. So instead, start and go through, you know, if it's physics and mechanics, a character picks a box up off the floor, puts it up on a shelf. Something really simple.
Really simple, yeah.
Give yourself a week. And wherever you end up at the end of the week, you're done. Cut it off, start a new one. And that way you're practicing planning, reference, blocking, splining, polishing. You're going through the entire process rather than doing it just once and then spending months on polishing. So you're getting better at the entire animation process. And by doing that over and over and over, you will be shocked at how quickly you get better.
I used to work on little animation tests too, just to like complete something. So even if it's like not a dialogue piece or a pantomime piece that's 5 to 10 seconds long, maybe just give yourself a quick assignment. Just like what he was saying, just like somebody putting something on a shelf, you know, if you want to understand just like simple mechanics, and then just do that and just break apart that, like the body mechanics. And yeah, and I would say, like, if there's something on your reel that isn't quite working, you want to work on those elements anyway. So if it doesn't necessarily go on your reel, you're doing something to actually help your understanding of that aspect a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you get the feedback that, like, they say, like, well, you know, we like the acting choice, but the weight doesn't feel great right now.
Right.
The very next shot you animate is probably not going to be the one where you just nail weight all of a sudden. That's going to be something to work on for, and I don't mean work on it for years, but it's just go through, pick assignments not with the goal of them ending up on the reel, but with the goal of you getting better at that thing. And you will get better at it, and then you're ready to put something on your demo reel. And in fact, one of the exercises maybe you didn't polish it all the way, but you can always pick one of them back up and finish it out for the reel if you feel like it's strong enough. But that's the way, like, they're not looking at it for you to have that demo reel be amazing. The demo reel is the representation of how good you are. So the goal should be just to get better.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So when you're done studying animation, wherever you are, an important part of the process is to be setting goals for yourself so that you continue practicing, that you're not just noodling a shot forever, but you have specific deadlines you're setting for yourself. And that idea that, you know, it's potentially the best work you're going to create is after you're done, where you can take all that learning and sort of put it into practice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it didn't really gel until the last, I mean, I was getting better the whole time, but there was kind of, for me, like a light bulb that went off in like the last 3 months of the program. For some people that happens 6 months to a year after the program. Some people it happens in class two, and those are the people that we despise. But, you know, for some people it's great.
Not that I knew what I was doing in class two, just something clicked.
Right.
In the class about force for me, just like, oh, I loved it. It's just like, I understood, like, okay, things need to cause things to happen, you know?
And people like Dan were the source of my depression from class 2 to 6. So, no, but it's just everyone
has seen his work. He's the source of my depression.
Anyway. But no, it's just, it just happens for everyone at a different rate. But that doesn't mean, like, just because it didn't click for you as soon doesn't mean you won't get just as good. It's just everyone learns different aspects of it in different ways.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing I wanted to jump on, I thought this was really important. You kind of brought this up, Travis, a second ago, is that idea of making sure to actually get your work out there. You might not feel like you're ready yet. There's the term that I think a lot more people are familiar with nowadays, Imposter Syndrome, where you just don't think your work is ready. And so you're constantly trying to make it better before you're even submitting it. So I feel like one of the nuggets that you're both kind of pointing out is put your work out there. Even if you don't feel it's ready, put it out there to get feedback from your peers, from your mentors, from the studios, so that you can get feedback and know what to work on.
Mm-hmm.
That imposter syndrome never goes away.
Yeah, it never.
I mean, like, that's
sweatbox yesterday. So
yeah, I mean, I've been working for over a decade now in films, and I'm still waiting to feel like I should be there. You know, but it's once again, it's because you know the things in your work that you were aiming for and you kind of missed. Even if that shot looks great to everyone else, as animators, we all have really high standards for ourselves. That's why we want to do this, because we want to make this awesome piece of art. And then you look at everyone else and you feel like, oh, they're just nailing it. But they feel the same way. You're just not seeing the things that they wish that they had done in their shots. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, that imposter syndrome is real and it never goes away. You know, every shot that I get, I'm like, well, this is the one where they find out I don't know what I'm doing. You know, you always have that feeling. And when you get out of school, especially, you're going to feel that way. I never thought I'd work on a movie. Like, growing up in Tennessee, that's like saying you wanted to go to the moon. Especially back then, like, the internet was not what it is now. Like, that was in the early days of AM. So yeah, my dream was to work on, like, commercials, which is great. I would have been very, very happy. So everything since then's been icing on the cake. But had that job fair not happened, I'm not sure I ever would have sent my demo reel to somewhere like an ILM or a Blue Sky, and I would have missed out on an amazing opportunity. That's
really cool. I wanted to ask you both, before we move over into questions, you know, we're kind of in the career section. You're both working at Blue Sky. Can you talk a little bit about your experience, the day-to-day feeling of what it's like to be there and be part of that community?
I think the culture of Blue Sky is great, because just everybody's trying to help each other out because they want to just make the best work as we can, you know. So there are a lot of information. There's a lot of information that you can find on the wiki page. We have like an internal wiki page with like character information and just like animation style of the movie and just like cinematic style of the cameras, and there's a lot of information.
Filmmaking in general.
Yeah, filmmaking
it's
in
amazing.
general. Yeah. And they have like this thing, it's called like Blue Sky Institute, where it's just like a bunch of resources where we could just get better as animators. And some of them are videos where like the directors have, when they were animators or supervisors, like they've given talks about like how they approach animation. Like, just like all this information is like there for us to get better. And that's just, I feel, the way the culture is. Like they have like a pod lead structure, which is
really cool.
Which is really great. Like I think they come 3 times a week, so like every other day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, where they just swing by your desk, and all the animators are assigned a pod lead, and the pod leads are usually like lead animators, and they like are a little bit more experienced, and like their work is like amazing, you know. And they just ask you like, do you need feedback on your stuff? And then you just show them what you have, and then they give you notes that aren't like performance related. They give you notes just on animation and just like polish. And even if you're working out an idea, they're a little bit more familiar with like what the directors have been looking for, because they've been on like pre-production and everything. So they just have a good eye that they're just going to give you a lot of great information, you know. So that's like the way things are structured at Blue Sky. So they want to help you. They want to make sure that they're getting the best work out of you, you know. And everything is very open. Like you could just walk, like they have also a character lead structure where like each character in the movie, some animators are assigned to, and like these are phenomenal animators.
Yes.
And they're
for real.
Yeah. And they are very approachable. Like you could either sign up. Actually, I've signed up to the villain of the movie. I've signed up to their rounds, and because they're like so involved with like shots and just like exploring the character, and even like talking to other people on the floor, that sometimes they miss rounds, and then they'll swing by and then be like, oh, you could just come by whenever you want. You don't have to like stick to the round schedule, because like if we're at our desks, just swing by and just say, you know, hey, can you look at this for a second? And they're very open to it, you know. It's not like you have to like be like, I mean, you have to be respectful, of course.
Of course.
But they're approachable, so you can just like walk over and they'll gladly give you feedback, you know.
Don't want to give you guys the impression when you get on your first job that you can just go and bother everyone at their desks whenever you want. Either like you got to learn the studio culture and like everything. But yeah, I just came over to Blue Sky in November, and yeah, I got to say I'm really, really impressed with it. I mean, of course, the very first thing was just seeing what everyone's doing, from CG animators to 2D animators. I mean, the level of talent in that building is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
It
honestly is.
and it's got, like Dan was saying, it's got a culture that I love. It's kind of the least stressful studio environment I've ever seen, because because you do get a lot of feedback from different people. You have character leads, your pod lead, supervisors, the director, but it doesn't feel ever like it's them like, oh, did you do this right? It's more of a support system that everyone benefits from you doing well. There's no sense of competition. I don't get any sense that if you do really well, someone else feels threatened by it. You know, there's never any reason for someone to not help you get your shot to where it needs to be. You know, and it's and I love it too, because I'm all about, if I've got a room of world-class artists, I'm going to use every last one of them, and it's only going to make me look good. I'm all about being in a room of really talented people and having that collaboration. Because if you're willing to do that with them, they're willing to do it with you, and everyone benefits. Yeah,
especially if you show that you've been listening to them and you apply their feedback as well. Yesterday, I approached, like after Sweatbox, the director said that they wanted to see a little bit more clarity in the ideas that I had, just like transitioning into the ideas. And then I was working a little overtime, and I know the lead for Lance.
Guy on that poster back there.
Back there. The lead for Lance, I know he was there because he is always working overtime.
Yeah, he is.
So
Graham's working hard.
Yeah. So I walked over to his desk. I'm like, Graham, you're here. And he's like, yeah, what's up, dude? That's how he was like, what's up, dude? And then I'm like, okay. So I showed him Sweatbox. He gave me these notes. Can you give me some feedback on it? And he's like, yeah, give me 2 seconds, because he was like in the middle of like working an eye. He was like zoomed in to his Maya session, and it's like an eyeball this close, and he was like working on the bags, the eye bags. He's like, these eye bags are such a pain in the ass. Like, got to make sure that they don't look too small or too shrunken, you know. And then he's like, so I gave him like, I'm like, okay, not gonna say anything. Don't want him to lose his train of thought. And he finished with that. He's like, okay, let's take a look at your shot. And then he just like spent a good 15 minutes, like spending time, you know, quality time. He's not just like trying to get me away from his desk and just like, you know, go back to his stuff. He's just like, okay, let's take a look at this and make it look as good as we can, you know, for Lance, especially because he's the Lance lead. So he wants Lance to look good in the entire movie, you know, pretty much. So it's kind of also a reflection on him, you know.
And every animator knows that, like, when you're making a film, it's not just about your shot. Like, when you work on a sequence, you want every shot in that sequence to be amazing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a film, like any shot that's not successful pulls the audience out of the movie. And then you got to work hard to get them back into where they're enthralled with that story. And so, you know, every animator is just a link in that chain. So, you know, there's no reason for any of us to ever want one of our coworkers to be unsuccessful. That only hurts the product as a whole. And it's also really nice. That was actually one of the reasons I got out of music and, you know, ended up in animation, was because in music, there's only one drummer for every gig. So all your buddies that are drummers, they're your competition. In animation, it's not like that. There's 100 animators on this movie. My friends that are animators on this movie also recommended me to get a job. You know, the whole thing is very open and collaborative, even to the story. The directors, they would do screenings for the crew and then ask us to send them notes. So we'd email them notes, and I was shocked that
they listened to us.
They actually listened to us, put changes in. I got an email back specifically from the directors.
He responds and just
you know,
says, like, I appreciate that you took the time to give us notes.
And then what's crazy is you actually can see some of those notes in the next version of the film sometimes. And so it's, I mean, even down to the story level, the story team and the directors, they're wanting feedback just like the animators do. You know, it's just collaborative from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, that's really cool.
On Peanuts, they did that, and there was a consensus that there was a sequence that everybody was not a fan of. And they said, you know what? We are going to listen to you guys and just cut that entire sequence and cut that entire character out of the movie.
Wow.
And it was late in the game. And they just like were bold and be like, all right, he's not doing anything for the story. We're just going to cut him out. And there was this whole thing where they felt bad for the leads and for all the work that was done. Right. So they like a rest in peace. It was for like Olaf, like Snoopy's brother. He was in the movie, and
oh man.
And they were like, so it was like a rest in peace email with like the Titanic song playing of all the work that's been done.
Sometimes in animation, though, as we say, you got to kill your babies.
Yeah.
You know, you think this idea is great, but if it's not helping the film, it goes. You know, so that's just.
And they listen. That's exactly
it's
one of the reasons why I love
it's a great
the culture
culture
here. They just like they listen.
That's cool. Awesome. Well, I want to jump over into questions now. We're getting towards the end of time, so I want to make sure we get through some of these. And then if we finish up with questions, we'll jump up and have a few more things I'd love to ask you guys.
Yeah, we can run a little bit over.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
One of the first ones that I thought was great is, what is the main difference between 3D animators, say, working on a full CG movie, such as like what you guys are working on now, versus live action VFX animation?
Oh, I can answer this one because the transition was a challenge. It's in some ways it's very much the same. In some ways it's extremely different. What is the same is, like we were talking about, those foundations of animation. In terms of animating, you are doing the same thing. You are using the fundamentals, using your creativity, using the principles. Where it's really different, obviously there's a style difference of a very realistic style versus a very stylized, cartoony style. And I found that I had to completely change my workflow based on, and I've gone back, you know, after working at Real Effects, I went back and worked on Jurassic World and Infinity War at ILM. and had to switch my workflow back. And so those transitions are a little tricky, but I find for me the biggest difference is in VFX animation or live action animation. I kind of tend to think in motion first. So I tend to start in spline. I'm still doing mainly pose to pose, but it's in spline because you're given a moving camera that you can't control. They shot footage and your camera matches that. And if you're on like a Michael Bay movie, it's going to be a 360 spin in some direction every single time. And so the first thing you have to do is get the motion of your character working with that camera move. And then I tend to go back in and really clean up my posing. In feature, I tend to start in stepped animation and do pose to pose, but it's really getting the poses working strongly and very graphically first, and then work out the motion. So you kind of, for me, I flip the order and where my focus is. But what is similar is both are exaggerations of reality. So even in realistic animation, like working, the Hulk is the example I always use on the first Avengers movie. If he throws a punch, if normally I would start here and in 12 frames get to here, if it's the Hulk, I'm going to hold it back here for a few extra frames while that body starts going, and then I'm going to shoot it across in 2 frames and then have a long settle. The overall timing might be the same as a realistic punch, but I push that spacing really, really hard, and because I'm basing it on reality, an audience member will believe it, but I've exaggerated it so it's more entertaining than just watching a guy in a suit do it.
That's an example of understanding the principles and exaggerating them where they need to be in order to get more of an impact, you know?
Yeah, so I think people think that in realistic animation you're just copying video reference, and that's really not the case. If you did that, it'd be super boring to watch. It's all an exaggeration. It's just cartoony animation, you're stripping out a lot more of the detail and then exaggerating further. You know?
Cool.
I agree. Like when I was at Rhythm and Hues, I spent a lot more time focusing on the mechanics of things and just like the weight of things early on, as opposed to just making sure that the poses look nicer on just from the start, because from the start you're trying to sell ideas, and sometimes with realistic animation you're trying to sell the movement as well as the idea. So I would layer a lot with realistic animation. So like I would figure out the path of action like he was saying, and then go in and just like layer that pass, and then just layer the pass of like the upper chest or something, and then make sure the head is traveling on that too. Then I would like throw in the expressions. But I actually tended to, like I like blocking, like step blocking in general. So I would just flesh out my step blocking sooner, or to more detail, to make sure that all the mechanics were there for like Yogi or Alvin and the Chipmunks, you know, where it was like live action behind like animated characters, you know.
And actually, Dan makes a good point too. Like, if anyone tells you like this is the correct workflow, don't listen to them. You know, there are 100 different ways to get to the finish line. The end goal is always the same. We're all trying to make great animation, but we all have slightly different ways of getting there that work for the way we think, you know. So that is, yeah, I didn't get good at stepped animation until I came over to feature, but that was just because that other thing came naturally. But guys like Dan have done incredible work in VFX starting in steps. So it's, you know, these are all just personal preferences, honestly.
If your director tells you, sometimes I've had that actually, where I'm more comfortable working in stepped, but I've had directors in the past tell me like, you know what, we kind of want you guys to work in spline if you can, so you might have to adapt, you know. But I mean, if you work one way, it's generally fine, you know, as long as your director can see things done in that way, I think it's okay. Because it's about communicating an idea.
Yeah, so, that is a challenge sometimes in live action movies where the directors weren't animators first.
Yeah, and that's exactly
so if
where
you
they
show,
ask for it.
You show them step animation, they're like, why is the character popping around everywhere? You know, it's, you know, so that is a challenge. I mean, depending on the production, you might do it differently too.
So it's learning to some extent also how the different directors respond to the early stages of animation so that you can kind of get something that they're going to respond to.
Yeah, and it might even be the studio. Like different studios have preferences on how things should work too. So it really, that's where learning, you know, I have certain preferences for my workflow, but I have done a little bit of all of what are considered the most common workflows, just because sometimes you do have to adapt to the show you're on, to the director you're working with, or even just the shot. Yeah, there's some shots that pose to pose works great, and then there's some shots when I was working on one of the Twilight movies. Thank you. Doing the wolves, it was you know, pose to pose on a quadruped is a nightmare for me. So that was a very layered approach where I'd move the body around and get the movement of the body that I want, and then start figuring out the leg movement based on that. Or sometimes there's a real, like if you have a character climbing something in a set, but it's really specific where the handholds and stuff have to be, you can't really go shoot video reference for that because you don't know exactly what distances those are. So then you kind of have to straight ahead animate. So you do need to get to where you're somewhat comfortable in all of the major workflows, because it makes your life easier.
Cool. This next question I thought was a great one. They're asking, should they take the first job offer that comes along to gain experience, even if it doesn't pay well, and maybe they don't like the studio as much, or should they wait until, you know, a good one comes around, their dream job?
That is,
I have an answer for this.
Go for it then.
Only because I have worked from like since I started in slot machines. I would say you could take, I mean, if you think you can get another offer, then, you know, by all means, wait for that next offer. But I would say there's a value in working in the industry and seeing what they have to offer and growing with like inside the industry as well. Because like my first job in like slot machines, I did that for maybe a year and a half or maybe 2 years. And I started to become familiar more and more with like the tools, and like there's other things you could learn, even though you might not think like you might benefit from it. There's other things that you can challenge yourself with, you know, and grow in that regard. Like let's say you're just making sprites of things, you can give yourself a challenge of like, okay, I got to make sure that each sprite expresses a certain emotion or expresses a certain idea. And that's like your test in performance, making sure that you have a goal of what you want, of the idea that you want to convey, and you nail it, you know? So that's something that will help you in the future in film, you know? So I think there's a real importance to just like working job to job and like just getting with each job, because it doesn't have to be permanent. I mean, you could work there for a year and then you're going to get better, and you're going to send your reel to different studios, and the next job is just going to be that much better, you know? And then like little by little, I think it's like a ladder for me.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think there is a level of it that's too extreme. If you have someone hitting you up and like, hey, I want you to work on my project, it doesn't pay, but it's going to be great exposure for you, don't take that job. That is a scam every time. If they want you to work on a project, you should be getting paid.
Right.
So don't do free labor.
The slot machine job paid. So.
Yeah. Like, but you'll see people all the time trying to get artists. You wouldn't ask, you know, a chef at a restaurant like, hey, I'm not going to pay you for this meal, but it'll be great exposure when I tell everyone else how much I enjoyed it. Yeah. Like he would kick you out of his restaurant. Yeah. And we should respect ourselves that much too. But that being said, when you come out of school, you're not going to probably go into your dream job. That's just not the way it works, because that dream job is everyone's dream job. There's so many people trying to get there, so you've got to get there slowly but surely. You know, I realize I'm saying this, well, I did luck out coming out, but I think when that happened, I was the first person ILM had hired out of school. You know, that's a rare thing, and it wasn't because I was so good. It was just this weird coincidence of timing and what they needed someone specifically for on that job. But I think, there's things you learn on the job that you can't learn any other way. It's not just about being good at animation. It's also about how to function in a studio environment. What are the things that not only make you a good animator, but a valuable employee? There's just a lot of stuff to be gained from working that you can't teach yourself in your bedroom or in a school program.
And there are a lot more elements than
Yeah.
quality of work actually that they look at.
Yeah.
Especially when you're at the studio, because it's not just quality of work. I mean, they have to be willing to work with you. And you have to be like able to take notes well. I think that's a real important thing.
Yes.
Just because if you're really good and you're constantly being like, oh, you know what, I kind of don't want to do it that way, so I'm just going to do it my way. But you don't say that, but you keep doing that in your work, and every time you show, they notice, okay, he didn't do the note that I said. Them being the supervisor, you're kind of creating like a.
You're not going to be there long.
Yeah,
you're just not.
You're like clogging the wheel a little bit, and then it's just like, yeah.
I won't say who or what studio, but one of the most talented animators I ever worked with is no longer in the industry because of just they could not collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's people skills that you really have to learn, and professionalism is a huge part of it.
Yeah, communicating,
and then also learning that, I think the way to think of yourself as a craftsman more so than an artiste, because you are an artist and you are using your creative skills, but you're using them to contribute to the director's vision.
To one vision, right?
And so you've got to learn, efficiency is a thing you're going to learn on the job, and communication with the production team. And also, I think early on I was really frustrated when they would say a shot was done. I was like, oh, but there's things I still want to polish. And I eventually had to realize that it's like if you hired someone like a carpenter to build you a chair. You're like, I need the chair in 5 days and I have $300. And on day 5, they're like, well, I'm not satisfied with the chair, so I'll give it to you in 2 days and I'm going to need another $200. You'd be furious. And as animators, we're being paid for the time we work on these projects. So you have to learn how to function as a professional to get the director and the team what they need from you on schedule. And that's something that just comes with working.
So it's really important to have those kind of stepping stones within your job rather than only going for your dream job. And then also, aside from building those animation skills, it's that professional development side of things too.
And you may find that what you think is your dream job, that idea changes over time. Like what I initially thought my dream job would be has changed over the years.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
Big time.
That's cool. I feel like this is a great question for both you guys. Do you feel like someone would have to live in California in order to get a job in animation? What are some other cities that you guys are aware of where animation studios are?
Yeah, definitely not. We're in New York, so.
Yeah. We work in Connecticut. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be in one of the big studios, then obviously California, Blue Sky's out here, Vancouver and Montreal are huge. London's huge. There's studios all over Europe now. But I do think we're really on the cusp of the industry changing a lot to where you're going to see more and more animation studios popping up, especially with the advent of all these streaming services and everything. Netflix is going to be opening an animation studio soon. But I think we're really getting to the point, because of internet and technology development, people are going to be able to work from anywhere.
Yeah.
We're right on the cusp of that really happening. And you can already do that with freelance and commercials and some other things. But actually, before coming here, I ended up taking this job, but I almost worked on the Bumblebee movie for ILM from my bedroom because I didn't really want to go up to San Francisco. And so they have that capability now. It's not widespread yet. Yeah. I almost worked on a Transformers movie from my bedroom, which is crazy, but that's just in the last few years. So I mean, there's no telling 5-10 years from now what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to go probably 5 more minutes if you guys don't mind, so that we go 10 minutes over. I thought this one was great. How do you know when to step away from your reference? So like right after blocking or even earlier. So it's kind of that idea of how long do you use your reference and how faithfully do you follow your reference versus cherry picking the ideas from it?
Sometimes I feel as if, like, let's say I shoot reference the first time and I try to follow it, and then I push things here and there to make sure that they express the idea a little bit stronger. So I kind of like go back and forth. So in that sense, I use my reference as a base, push it a little bit further, and then sometimes I'll go back to the reference to see the initial idea. And sometimes, actually, I just did this, I'll reshoot reference for certain sections of the animation to just make sure to clarify a little bit of what that idea is. So like if there's a point or something in there, I'll just reshoot reference for that little section and just make sure that's like, it's like I want this kind of point to make sure that it has that little snappiness, and it's also like a little bit more clarified on what the intention is behind it. Because maybe in the reference I was just going through the whole motion as like, okay, and I do this, but it doesn't have that snap because I was just like, you know, I wasn't focusing on that moment. But now that I know that this moment needs a little bit more, I'm going to just shoot reference for that. And then I'll use my reference again, and then, you know, fix that section up. And then if it's like feeling a little too tame, I'll even push that even more. Like, and usually the way I push things is like I'll track arcs, and I'll make sure that like instead of it going like this in a more like straight, you know, path of action, maybe I'll do a little bit further up and then like overshoot a little bit further that way and then come back, you know, so it's like this kind of thing, and see what that does with the animation, you know. I also think about tension and like relaxed, things that are relaxed. So if in the animation, or sorry, if in the reference, things are a little bit more, or things are tense, but they're not as tense as I want them to be, sometimes I'll make sure, like I'll have like see points in my knuckles, and like see contact points, and I'll make sure that like those contact points, like this part of my knuckle connects with that part of the knuckle, and then get that tension in there. And maybe in the reference it was like this, and I don't want that, I want this, you know. So I'll, you know, push the tension in things, in other words, exaggerate the tension. So there's tension in something, and then there's a relaxation in something, and then make sure that you get that relaxed idea, or the relaxed energy, you know. So those are things how that I guess that's when I kind of stray away from my references, just like when I'm pushing those ideas.
Yeah, I think earlier in my career, I was more tied to my reference than I am now. I do think there's some value to it. Like when we talk about doing exercises, I do think there is some value sometimes in doing an exercise where you really, really stick very close to reference and try and get every little bit of detail that's in there. That's not a piece you're going to put in a reel, and it's not the way you're going to animate on the job. But I spent a number of years, you know, working like in VFX, where early on I wasn't as confident in my animation skills. I was really, really relying on reference a lot, and sometimes I was sticking a little too close to it. But because of that, I kind of feel like I have a database now of like, I know the head often does this, or the hips will do, like I have this kind of tool belt to pull from now, these ideas that I know happen in body mechanics because I studied some video reference so closely, which is really helpful now. But for me, I use the reference mainly now to get the idea and the performance. I'm someone that I'm much better at getting in front of a camera and acting something out than I am at like drawing sketches to accomplish it. That's the way I work. And so for me, I will spend a lot of time getting my video reference right, like kind of an excessive amount of time, but it's because I know if I find the performance there, blocking is going to go so much faster. You know, I'll make up that time and then some easily, and it'll be better quality. And then I'll go through and do my pose to pose animation based on key poses from the reference. Once I have that though, for me, that's when I turn the reference off. When I go into a spline pass, I'm not using the reference anymore to figure out how to spline. I'm looking at what those poses are and kind of seeing like, you know, at that point I'm judging the motion just from my animation eye. And then if something feels a little weird or off, I might, like Dan was saying, pull back up the reference and say like, oh, see, like, okay, the hips were doing that. That's why the weight feels weird here. So I'll still pull from it here and there, but generally after that, I try and at least do a pass in splining, also because then judging the timing when you go to spline, I can get away from the reference and really start pushing and pulling things based on what feels good. And if I keep that reference up while I'm doing that, I think I'd be too cautious and too scared to deviate. So for me, going from blocking to spline is a great time to take a break from your reference. And then in the polish phase, you can pull it back up and pick out some little details to make sure that you're getting all those little nuances you wanted in there.
And again, it depends on the shot that you're working on.
Yes, very much so.
Because sometimes you might want to stray away from reference a little bit sooner because the motion is a little bit more exaggerated than you want. You know?
Sometimes you can't even do reference.
Right, exactly.
You know, it's,
so, yeah.
You know, that happens. So it's, you know, if you only ever animate by really sticking closely to the reference, that will eventually bite you. Because there's going to come a shot where you just can't use reference, and you have to just have animation knowledge to get yourself through it.
Cool. Well, I wanted to thank you both. I know we had a number of other questions. We might follow up with you separately to see if we could answer some of these questions offline.
Sure.
But I wanted to come back to that topic. You know, we're talking to all of these students about, you know, what does it take? How do you become an animator? And I wanted to ask you both kind of some final thoughts that you have and some, you know, final tip that you might want to share with people watching.
Well, I think it's difficult to be an animator. It's easier said than done sometimes. But one of my biggest things is like, you just have to little by little, you know, just because that's how I did it. I mean, I didn't get a job right away after school. You know, I went to school in Chicago. I didn't have very many instructors who were in the industry. So I think just like getting a mentor and having a mentor who knows what they're doing, you're eliminating a lot of mistakes that you will eventually make, because like we've already made those mistakes, you know, and we were also trained by people who were in the industry, you know, so yeah. Like, so, you know, we've made mistakes, our mentors have made mistakes that they've taught us. So you're kind of eliminating that from the process. So I think getting a mentor is one of the biggest things you can do. And also just like, just little by little, just practicing effectively, you know. And it's not just like practicing making the same mistakes over again. That's why I feel like it's important to get feedback from other people, just because like you're aware of your mistakes and you're able to address them. And don't be afraid to address your mistakes. You know, I think that's really important, because sometimes you animate something and you feel like, okay, I feel like this is going well, but then like somebody says like, oh, you know what, the mechanics feel a little bit off. And I keep referring to mechanics because I feel like that's one of the things that stand out very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just like if the weight is wrong, anybody can see that, you know?
Especially student work, that's one of the most common things that people struggle with.
Yeah, yeah. So get feedback on the weight and don't be afraid to change it. Don't be afraid. I mean, this is a creative field, so it's not like once you mark it down, it's like that's the answer and then you're going to get F for it, you know? It's more of like a sculpt, like a clay, you know? You just have to mold it into what it needs to be. And I never thought about doing what you said earlier in the sense of like going back to your old work and fixing it up. I think that's a great feedback, because it shows that your animation isn't final when it's final. You have the opportunity, you have the option of going back and molding it into something else, like once you learn something, you know? So it's not just like end all be all. So constantly keep practicing and keep practicing effectively, get eyes on it, and like find a mentor that is gonna be able to kind of like guide you in the right path, and just like work little by little, getting better and better, and just like, you know, comparing yourself to the day before, and just like, okay, is my animation better? And then that's gonna tell you that you're going in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a few different things that are really important. I mean, we've talked about a lot of them. Obviously, you know, for me, the biggest one is always focusing on your skill set more than the demo reel. You know, because the demo reel is just your sales pitch for your skill set. That's it. You know, and so if you get to where you can animate well, you will have a good demo reel. And that's just, you know, it's not a chicken or the egg situation. One definitely comes before the other here. But I think for a lot of people that are trying to be animators, they focus on pristine polish or these, you know, all these little and that stuff is really nice, but that's like the icing on top of what's actually important. What's really important is the fundamentals and strong ideas, and those two things together. I know a lot of students, especially when you guys are coming out of school, they're not always hiring you based on, you know, like you're not going to go in as a lead or a senior animator. They're a lot of times hiring you based on potential. And So I don't think you have to feel like, oh man, their shot's so pristinely polished and mine's like good but not great. You know, that if your ideas are great and the fundamentals are there, they can teach you polish. They'll give you the notes to get the polish there. So like I said, go through the whole process over and over and over, getting feedback as much as you can, and then don't shy away from certain types of animation or certain aspects of animation. I know early on for me, I was like, oh, I like doing like action stuff, and I'm not as into like subtle acting. Well, it was because I wasn't as good at subtle acting. You know, years later, I now really enjoy subtle acting, but it's because it doesn't terrify me anymore. So those things that you aren't as interested in, a lot of times that's what you need to focus on to be well-rounded. And then the other thing, the big tip I would give you guys is just anybody you meet in school, anybody you meet on the job, treat everyone well, treat everyone with respect, because it is such a small industry. It really is. And the people that are coming up behind you, like I jokingly say this at the end of every class I teach at AM, but it's the truth. I'm like, hey guys, remember that I was cool when I need a job from you someday. You know, like, I mean, it's just the way the industry is. It's so small. And so, you know, that's a real tip that I think a lot of people early on don't take to heart. And if you're not nice or kind towards someone, they're going to remember that years later, and it really could affect you getting in somewhere. So that's another big aspect of this industry. People that are difficult or not cool to be around don't last in the industry. The upside of that is we work with all really nice people because all the jerks have been kicked out the door, you know, so it makes it a really great place to be. But just always focus on that skill set. Don't shy away from the things you think are your weaknesses. Dive into them, and get feedback constantly. And if you do that, just put in the hours, it'll happen. You know, it's just, it's putting in that 10,000 hours, like they say about anything. But if you really take on the stuff you're kind of scared of, you're going to learn a lot.
I actually always look at it, because I thought about that too, in the sense that like you're going to make it. Like I always look at it as, even if you don't reach like that, you know, dream job, you're still going to be in the animation industry because you're working on stuff that you're kind of, you know, your weaknesses. You're working on your weaknesses. So if you're working on to get like a film job or a video game job and you don't quite land it, you're going to be in the animation industry. And for me, I always thought, yeah, that's better than, like, nothing wrong with working in business, but it's not for me. And what would I do if I'm not an animator, like in film? At least I'm an animator and, you know, working on something. So
yeah, and it's I mean, I know animators that were in film that left it to go work on commercials, and they're pumped. They're so happy. You know, it's so like I said, that dream job changes. Like you really don't know. You really don't know what your perfect fit in the animation industry is until you're in it. Like my ideas early on, like I used to just be like, I want to work on the biggest movie there is. And now I really don't care about that anymore, because the day-to-day is what matters so much more.
That's how mine has changed too.
I've had wonderful experiences on films that were loathed, and I've had terrible experiences on films that are universally loved. And so to me, it's more now, where am I working? Who are the people I'm working with? Am I going to enjoy the process? Because that's what the memories are. You know, and so so I think more than anything, it's just set yourself up so that your skill set is flexible enough that you have options available to you, that you could work in different areas of animation, because you don't know what your perfect fit's going to be. That really does change over the years when you've been working.
That's cool. So really don't limit your options.
Not at all.
Always keep trying to grow. And I thought that was a great nugget too, of when you do get into the industry or you're at any networking event, be humble. You know, don't bring ego into the mix.
Check your ego at the door. I've seen some people come straight out of school and then come into a job thinking they're hot stuff. And it's like, you know what? And I was guilty of this. Not that, I never did that, but I was guilty of, there were sometimes I would work with animators when I was like first starting and they were way older than me. And I was like, man, I can polish a shot better than they can. But I didn't understand at that point, there are things because of their experience they were capable of that I could not. And there were things that made them incredibly valuable to a studio. And now if I was supervising a film, I would have taken that person over me at that point any day of the week. And there's just stuff you don't know when you're first starting out. So always remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, we've been working for a long time, and like, there's plenty of stuff I still don't know. Like, there's nowhere I will ever work where I can't learn a lot from everyone around me. So just try and always keep that perspective.
Always learn. Yeah.
Always, always. You know, as soon as you feel like you're top dog, that means you're done progressing.
I'm sure, like, even the top dogs at Blue Sky don't think they're top dog.
No.
I mean, you see their work and you're just like, wow, this is amazing.
I mean,
so
I
you
guess,
say that in front of them, and then like, oh, there's so much that I need to work on, you know, and just like they list like a bunch of things that they still need to do on that shot. It's like, can't see it. It looks amazing to me.
Yeah, I got to meet Glenn Keane not that long ago, and you know, Glenn Keane, like, who's better than Glenn Keane? Like, seriously, like, that's one of those people you look at and you're like, well, I'll never be that good.
Yeah.
And he's
like the most humble.
He's so humble, and
Yeah.
he still has things that he feels that he needs to learn and accomplish. And there is no mastering this.
Yeah.
It's never done.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I wanted to thank you both again so much for joining us. You know, for any of you out there who are just getting started in animation, you're trying to decide where to go, both Dan and Travis teach with us. I know, Dan, you're currently on break while working on Spies in Disguise. Travis teaches right now in our Animation Basics class. So if you're at that point where you still need to work on those fundamentals, take a class with Travis and learn from him. There's so much to pull.
See you in class 1, guys.
Yeah. And otherwise, I want you all to keep an eye out for Spies in Disguise. Looks like it's releasing September 13th. So it looks...
It's Christmas, you know.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. So you guys get a little bit more time.
Get a little more time. Thank goodness, yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you guys haven't checked out the trailer yet, definitely make sure to go do that. And we did have a couple questions come up related to your guys' reels. And I know you had mentioned that you might send it to us. So when we send out the email replay, if you guys want to show any of these guys, like what you guys have worked on, we'd love to include that.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
definitely.
Cool.
And guys, remember, we were cool when we need a job from you someday.
That's right. Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
You never know.
That's right. Cool. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you guys.
was great.
This was a lot of fun.
Cool. See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.